So we're here to talk about the Big Nemaha Watershed. Thanks everybody for coming. I appreciate it. It's a really nice day. So next slide. We do have some people on Zoom. Hopefully everyone can hear me talking. If you can't hear me, put it in the chat. I don't know, that doesn't make any sense. So there are some Zoom features you can mute and unmute. Start your video and then use the chat feature. If you have any problems during the Zoom, just put that in the chat, and we have Ryan over here who is manning the chat, and he will help you out. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation and you're on the Zoom, put it in the chat, please. Slide. We'll have you, the Zoom members will be muted, and use the chat. You can email Elijah, who's over here. And then we will be putting, for people in person, we might put it on our YouTube, this presentation.
Yeah, the recording of the.
So if that's not something you're comfortable with, yes, please. I was made aware that our invitation said this meeting would be a half hour. It probably be a little bit closer to an hour. If you have to leave at a half hour because of something, I will not be offended. Your attendance counts. And if you missed something because you left, just email one of us and we can fill you in. No hard feelings. That was our mistake. Okay.
Okay, so we have a question already.
Oh my gosh.
Kendra is asking, is there a way for us to get a copy of the slides?
Yeah, sure.
I think Michelle can share those following the meetings today.
Yeah. Yep, no problem with that. And then you can always just call any of us if you have just like a specific question, you don't want to take the slide to find it. That's what we're here for. And then also throughout the presentation, please, like, this is a big presentation and I would much rather just talk with you guys because I know this stuff. So please just stop me and ask any questions. And one of the nice things about like finally being in person is that you guys can talk to each other and meet each other. And, we find that like communities are good resources for other communities because you're dealing with the same river, even, just downstream or upstream. So please just stop me at any time because like I said, this is a big presentation and I think it would go a lot better if we have some breaks. I'll start with introductions. We'll go around the room and then we will try to get the Zoom people introduced. I'll remind it once it comes along again, but if you're on the Zoom, please let us know if there's anyone else in the room with you who is listening, because we need to add that person to the sign-in sheet. So we have a good idea. FEMA likes to know that we have reached out to everyone. So I'll start. My name is Deanna Ringenberg. I've been with the Department of Natural Resources for 5 years. I'm an engineer. I work on some floodplain studies, like the more enhanced, the AE models. I'm going to do the study in Firth. So look forward to that. And now we'll just go around there. Elijah?
Sure. I'm Elijah Kaufman. I'm a certified floodplain manager with Nebraska DNR. I work in the floodplain management section, but on a different side. I don't necessarily do the mapping and engineering. I'm more familiar with regulations and flood insurance concepts regarding floodplains. And so if you have any questions about floodplain regulations, the minimum standards of Nebraska, or the flood insurance program, you can certainly reach out to me. I did leave some business cards, or you can just talk to me here while you're here. So good to meet you all.
My name is Chuck Wiggert, and water resource manager at Big here at Tecumseh. Just come to hear what you have to say.
Okay, cool.
I'm Lisa Wiggins, so I'm representing Gage County today. I'm the zoning director and also the emergency manager of Gage County. Nice. I'm actually representing the non-natural resources district, also here.
Good.
I'm Don Geiser, board chair for the villages now. And of course, we're interested in the impact on the village and how it's going to affect us for the dogs.
Sure.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yes.
Of course, please ask them. Nice.
David Holman.
Okay.
Joe Hepler, for the village of Earth, and also the administrator and the administrator. Water sewer.
I'm Aisha Burton. I work on the NFIP watershed thing.
So I'm Ryan Stastny with DNR. I'm one of the people that's doing the mapping for the project. And I do all the submittals as well, so.
And we have,
I'm Andy Cabral, I'm with FEMA Region 7, and out of Kansas City office. I'm the cooperative technical partnership program manager, and for this project, I'll be the.
and then, okay, let's try the Zoom people. I guess do we
Yeah,
have?
if you can hear us on Zoom, go ahead and one by one, just unmute yourselves and introduce yourself. If you don't have a microphone, you can just type it in the chat.
Is anyone trying to talk?
No, not right now.
I can start. I'm Derek Schreiner with the Corps of Engineers Omaha District and also the Nebraska Silver Jackets coordinator for the Corps.
Great, thanks, Derek. Anyone else? We have Kendra and John.
Yeah, Kendra introduced herself, Village of Adams, the clerk. And then John is the water operator for the Village of Table Rock.
Okay, great. So we've got Adams and Rock. All right, great. Thank you very much. And then the Zoom attendees, do you guys have anybody in the room with you? Just like the mayor or the dog catcher? Okay, all right. Okay, so why are we here? We're here because we're updating your maps. Everybody knows that flooding can happen and it poses a risk, and you guys are here because you're concerned about the flooding risk in your community and really how these maps are going to affect your development. And so we're just going to talk about it. And our goal here at the Department of Natural Resources is to make your community more resilient to flood risk. And we know that understanding where that risk is kind of that first step in the whole process of becoming more resilient to flood risk. So the way that we can accomplish this goal is we update your community's flood risk by using new maps. And when new engineering practices and processes come out, it means that some of these maps could be updated. We like to provide the communities with the best and most accurate flood insurance rate maps that we can, firms. And you can use that information for your flood risk. So kind of our outline for today, we're going to talk about why we need to do the maps. And then we'll go into how the maps are made and then how you guys can help us in that process. And then we'll go into a timeline and reducing your flood risk. So why we need to update your maps. The Big Nemaha maps haven't been updated. Some of them from 2005, some of them 2013. A lot's changed in that time. We have new topographic data, new elevation data from most of this area's 2018. So it's a lot more updated and it's just a lot better elevation data than we used to have. We used to work on contours and now it's a very refined map. Hopefully at the end of this, the maps will be a little bit easier to read. I don't think this area has a lot of what we call paper maps. That's the map there on the left. But our new maps will all be digital. They'll all have the underlay of the Google Street View or whatever, that you want to use. So it'll be a lot easier for you to use, a lot easier for you to pinpoint on a home or a development and try to decide if they're in and out of the floodplain. The new maps, you can use them as you use the old maps to determine where flood insurance is needed, if it's a mortgage-backed or federally backed mortgage, and then just providing information for your community as you're developing your ordinances, as you're planning emergency services, those kinds of things. So you can use these new maps just as you were using your old maps. Just a quick overview of how we make the maps. I guess any questions on that or anything that you're thinking in your head right now that you want to talk about? No? Okay. All right. So our overview of our map, we start with base map and we gather a lot of different information that can be like an aerial imagery, different stuff. And then we take our topography. So that gray and white picture that I'm talking about, that's what we use for our elevation map. You can see the outline of the stream in that topography map. So we call that LiDAR. I might use that word in and out, but that's what our elevation maps are used as LiDAR. And then we use that information to develop a floodplain boundary. And then we just kind of make a sandwich them all together and you have a floodplain boundary. And that's just a real high level. If you want to know anything more, we would love to talk about it. So the first step I talked about was base map. That's where we gather just the aerial imagery and then roads. And then political boundaries is really where you guys come in. As if you're looking on our map online, our interactive map, and you see that the political boundary isn't quite what you think it should be, let us know. It's super easy to change that right now. And that will get printed on your flood insurance rate map. So we really want to change that now. And if you look at it and you think like, oh gosh, that new development on the east side of town isn't added, you can just send us either a shape file. And if you don't have anyone that does GIS or anything like that, we've taken like, someone tears a map out of the phone book and uses a Sharpie. Like we can figure that out. And if you say, the northern road should be Elm Street, and we'll draw a straight line for you. So that's really like one of the biggest takeaways from this is make sure that your boundary on our maps are correct. And we can look at that a little bit later to show you what I'm talking about. But and that's the super easy thing to change for us right now, harder in the future. So for a lot of this watershed, we're going to do what we call a basic study. We call it a basic study, but as Ryan can tell you, he's working on it right now. It's not just like we throw it in a computer and the computer throws it back at us. There's a human that is like taking a lot of painstaking detail to look at confluences, to look around cities, to make sure that this is the best map that we can produce. So even though it's a basic study, there's a lot of work that goes into it. We call it a basic study because it will be a zone A floodplain in the end. So all these communities, except for Firth and Tecumseh, will have a zone A map in the end of this. And that means that there are no elevations printed on the map, or no way to find the elevations. So you would have to request a base flood elevation from us if you want to get the elevation for permitting. And we also call it a basic study because we don't consider roads and bridges. We don't like look at the size of the culvert that the water is going through or the bridge. We don't take the time for that kind of stuff. So the mapping doesn't necessarily take into account. If the bridge is too small, it might cause some flooding behind it, water will back up. So we might not see that as much on the map, but it is painstakingly looked over. Ryan's been working on it. So again, the zone A areas will be the light blue lines. Those are our basic studies. We do have enhanced and Firth, and you guys already have it in AE there, so you'll get kind of what you had before. Enhanced studies are more detailed. We actually send a crew on the ground. They do survey. We did survey 2 years ago, I think, in Firth, and we looked at the bridges. We look at the depth of the river. We look at how high the road is and everything, and the culvert size. And then on the end, we will have cross sections, and you can use those cross sections on the FIS, the flood insurance study, to get your base flood elevation. We also have a floodway, and floodways are hard to understand. I think I had trouble understanding it at first. The technical definition is floodways reserve land next to a stream to allow the water from a 1% annual chance to flow without cumulatively increasing the BFE more than 1 foot. Makes sense. Doesn't make sense to me. So really what a floodway is if you have a 100-year flood, and then you just imagine you're just squeezing it. Just squeezing it. So the land outside of my hands is dry. I'm squeezing it until the difference between the 100-year flood and the water that is squeezed is a foot. And in practice, what that does is this floodway is supposed to limit the development along the stream. And if you have a floodway and you need development, you'll need a no rise from an engineer. And then we have no human habitation in the floodway. So you won't be able to build homes in the floodway. Any questions on that? you guys won't have floodways, so you don't have to think about it.
So what else, or what did you build on? That's gonna. Water.
Yeah, so what we have what's called a no rise, which means that an engineer is supposed to go in and if you have a development not for human habitation, like I'm working on reviewing one right now that's like a sand pit gravel lake in the floodway. So then an engineer has to go in and change the computer model to show that that isn't causing any rise at all in the floodplain or in the water surface elevation. So it is restrictive, but it is helping your community kind of manage that risk. And lots of times they're like your guys is on I looked at Town Branch in Tecumseh, but they're just right along the river. So does that answer your question? Does anyone have any other questions? So just in case Tecumseh comes later or looks at this video, Tecumseh has its own AE study. We're going to do the Town Branch, which is the one that actually is just right over there. The one that goes through town, we're going to do that as a traditional 1D study, which is what we usually do. And then we're going to do the North Fork Big Nemaha as a 2D study, which is something kind of new and exciting. And we don't need to talk about it because no one is here. If Tecumseh listens to this video and wants to talk about it, they can call me. In the village of Firth, we have just started that model, but we're looking at doing a 1D, which is what you guys have before. The 1D just assumes that you have cross sections and it assumes that all the water is just going real nice and it's just going all down the river. A 2D model will like make the water go up and over and do more what water does naturally. But we think for your river right now, and it may change if we look into it, but we think for now, we will do a 1D study in the village of Firth, and it'll look a lot like what you had before.
I gotta ask the question,
Sure.
when you guys are doing these studies, do you take into effect all these NRD dams that are being put in
Yep.
and the ponds that
Mhm.
are reflecting?
Yep.
Or slow release type stuff?
Yeah, we do. I've gone through and we do a dam analysis for all of the dams that drain more than a square mile. And we actually take into account, we go back and we look at the plans and we look at the size of the culvert or the size of the spillway, excuse me, and the elevation of the water and the amount of water that would go through it. And we do use that elevation in our mapping. And we do that in the basic studies as well. But yeah. And then if we have a dam that we decide provides flood control that might change the flow of the river, we will take that into account when we do an enhanced study, the AE. We have a latecomer.
And they take into consideration, if you're like railroad.
Isn't it? Should we- do you want to sit at the table or? Okay. You're from the city of Tecumseh? Okay, actually, we'll go back because we skipped you.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Are we throwing the A zones in 1D or 2D?
1D.
1D.
Yeah, railroads, yeah.
I say is all that taken into consideration.
In an enhanced study, we'll look at bridges and railroads and stuff like that, but when we do the zone A, the basic study, we don't really take that into account. A lot of the railroads are built up, you know, and that it will show up on our elevation mapping. So some of them kind of act as like a
I mean, they work
levee.
both ways.
Yeah, yeah. I'm from Fremont and the railroad acted as kind of a levee and saved my parents' house from flooding in the 2019 flood. So yeah, we take them into account, not specifically, but they do show up in our elevation maps. So they will affect our mapping. That's fair, right?
Yeah.
Tecumseh. We are doing an AE study. Right now you have AE maps in the city of Tecumseh. So we're gonna do new AE maps. The Town Branch will be our traditional 1D study, which is what you guys have now with cross sections and things like that. It'll look very similar, or the boundaries may change, but it's a similar method. The North Fork Big Nemaha, we have an engineer working on it, Steph, and he's going to do a 2D study on that, which is a little bit different. You should be able to use it a lot like you use your map now, but it might look a little different, and it might take some, you might have to work with our department a little bit just to understand it, but we're here to help you with that. And we're doing, I just want to make clear, we do all of this in-house. A lot of other states don't. So if you have any questions about anything, we're a small team this is what we do. So. Okay, so hydrology. Hydrology is just a fancy word that means how much water is going down the river. We calculate how much water is going down the river for different storm events. So we have 6 different events that we look at. We go from like the 10-year to the 500-year. We like to use gauges where we have them. We don't always have them. And when we don't have them, we have these big fancy equations that we call regression equations that we use. And those take into account how much water is draining into that area, what the land is like, the slope of the bank, the slope of the river, different things. And then we use that to like estimate the water. And we do check that against some of our gauges where we can, just to make sure that we have a couple different equations for the state. You can imagine over here it's a little bit different than Scotts Bluff. So we do have an engineer that checks that to make sure that that's an appropriate fit. For enhanced studies for the AE, for the Firth and Tecumseh, we like to use gauges as much as we can. We do have some other programs that will look at the water in more in depth, and we use those where we don't have gauges.
Is there any gauges though? I mean, there's only this far somewhere. Auburn, they just took out there's Nebraska City.
Yeah,
And
actually, you're right. I did the gauge analysis. Now.
Mike.
There aren't a lot. When we don't have a lot of them, we use the regression equations. And then if we don't have enough to like verify the regression, then I think I ended up having to look at kind of this whole corner of the state because the topography is similar and there's a lot more water down here than there is in any other part of the state. So, but yes, we would love to have gauges in every district. So realistic. Hydraulics is just a fancy word for how high the water is. Oh, I should be repeating the questions.
Oh,
We'll do better. Let's see, hydraulics is the elevation of the water. So for our basic studies, we do a 1D method, we have a cross section. And that's how we get the elevation of the water. We take our elevation maps and we take how much water is going through, we get a depth, and then it's just a little simple math equation where we have the elevation of the ground plus the depth of the water. It's similar in enhanced as well. Enhanced again takes into account more things like bridges and culverts and things like that. And then we use that for the floodway. And you guys will have floodway again. With mapping, if we already have an AE study with floodway, when we replace the maps, we have to do at least that. So we're obligated to do that. With this, and I don't think this is fully funded, but it will likely happen. We will have flood risk data. These are super cool. These are not used for regulatory purposes, so not used for permitting or anything like that, but it's just kind of a tool you can use to help your community. We have the depth grid. So this will be on our map and you can pinpoint a house or a location or something and you can see how deep the water is. We find this is really helpful with people who like, well, I'm not in the floodplain, you know, those kind of people. You can show this to them and be like, well, you are in the floodplain and the depth is 1/2 foot. And then sometimes people, when they hear the word floodplain, they think of like a deluge coming from the hill, but 1/2 foot, they'd be like, oh yeah, you know, I guess the water did come to my front porch step, you know, that seems reasonable. Or, you know, it was just up to my house. So these can be helpful tools for you guys. And it can also be used for planning. You can see like, This is Seward Road, right, I think here. Yeah, you can see like, okay, Seward Road looks like it's pretty covered in a 100-year flood. Maybe if we're gonna put in a new firehouse or new ambulances or new, whatever, we should probably keep them on the other side of that floodplain. Just, it kind of gives you an idea of emergency planning, how you can work that. The percent annual chance is the chance every single year that that specific property will be flooded. So we call the 100-year floodplain, we call them the 1% annual chance. So everyone in there has at least 100 or 1% chance of flooding. But as you can imagine, if you're closer to the stream or the river, you have a higher percent of flooding. So sometimes that kind of helps people too. Like, gosh, every year you're rolling the dice, there's 4% chance that it might flood. Okay, the letters. We sent out letters that are potentially very confusing. Yes, exactly. I don't blame you. I would come to, because I'd be like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do with this? So what those letters say in general is talking about kind of what I already talked about, is that you guys are going to get AE studies. We're going to use a one-dimensional method for one of your streams and 2D for the other. We're using a one-dimensional method for you guys. And then all of the rest of you guys are getting basic zone A mapping. That's pretty much all the letter said. If you want to look at that letter and let us know if the contact information is wrong, or if I guess that's probably the big thing that you would look at it. Or if you're thinking, oh, we're getting a zone A, maybe we could use a zone AE. We can look into it. We can have one of our engineers look into it, but so zone AE can be more accurate mapping, but can also, with the floodway, cause some more challenges down the road with development. So it's kind of something to consider. So, okay, any questions on those? No, okay, and as part of that, it's an official letter, so as part of that, you have a comment period. So even after this meeting, you can go to your board, you can go to a mayor, whoever, and just talk to them. If they have any comments or any kind of anything about it, you just let us know, and the deadline is October 1st for that. So, and if you have other comments afterwards, we can address them too, but that's the official period. So you guys are really one of our biggest tools here. You guys know how it floods, you've seen it, you've been there. So as we're developing these maps, we would like to hear from you if you think that we're missing an area or we've added an area. If you have areas where there's a lot of loss, repeated loss, if there's new development, this says the past 5 to 10 years, but our elevation data is from 2018. So if you got a lot of developing done during COVID, good for you, and let us know about it. And then let us know if you had any drainage studies, if you had JEO come in and look at your culverts or something. We can take any of that information. If they did a hydrology study, water flow study, we'll sure look at that and see if that lines up with what we're seeing. High water marks, even we can take if you're like, gosh, we had that big flood and there was a line on the barn and we had a surveyor look at it. We'll take that too. The big thing for your input and the easy thing for you guys to do is the corporate boundaries. So that's looking at your community's boundary on our map and the ETJ. Kind of already talked about this stuff, but if you have any information about your bridges, especially you guys in the hand study, if you have as-built, I think we've been able to get all of them. Stefan's working on yours right now and I haven't heard anything, so. And then any kind of high water marks, and also if you have any photos of flooding that you took and you want to like sign a waiver or just say that you give us the rights, we will absolutely always take pictures of flooding. We're nuts for those, we love them. So we're gonna watch just a little bit of video so you don't have to listen to me talking. Any questions?
No question.
Denver is a very active community. People come here because they love the open space.
The best part of my job is getting to see the final product, like Confluence Park. This park provides an experience with nature for people who live in an urban setting.
Rivers and streams add charm to a city, but they also bring a risk of flooding.
I don't think people understand the potential flood threat associated with this area and the fact that a portion of this park is really done as a mitigation to that threat.
Denver's Urban Drainage Flood Control District is constantly looking at flood risk data and working on ways to make the community safer. One way they do this is by using the latest data to update their local flood map so the community understands its flood risk.
When we are going through a floodplain mapping process, we reach out to the public and look for anecdotal evidence that they might have so that we have the best information in the maps that FEMA ends up using.
As flood maps are developed, FEMA and the community work together to gather the most accurate data. Communities provide input on areas of flooding concern early in the process, so they build the map together.
We know our streams, we know our communities, and so we bring local knowledge to the mapping process.
This also makes the process more efficient and cost-effective for everyone. Communities don't need to wait for FEMA. They can start an update at any time with a community-initiated map revision.
It was about 1996. We had a very heavy snowfall. The small creek, Mercer Creek, overflowed and filled our neighborhood several blocks in each direction. The water was about 3 feet deep in front of my house. The flood 20 years ago came slowly enough that we were able to move out of harm's way. But when it happened this year, I woke up at 6 in the morning and I had 18 inches of water in the house.
Because flooding is so common here, Kittitas County has a lot of new flood data. The community partnered with FEMA to update its flood map.
We are in a very active process now of updating those maps. We just finished 200 miles of remapping. That was through FEMA's mapping process. We're supplementing that with our high resolution digital maps. If you, as a resident, believe that this map is inaccurate and you have a high water mark on your barn, we can go out and survey it and we can use that elevation to decide whether or not our map's accurate. So that anecdotal information is extremely important.
Updating flood map is highly encouraged. Communities that take an active role as they go through the map update process help make their maps current and precise as possible.
These maps really give us a better idea of what that extent of flooding is going to be when it happens. They empower people to make much better decisions about the most important investment in their lives, their homes.
Want to learn more about collaborating on your community's flood map? Get more details at FEMA.gov/mitigation.
Okay, so now that we've talked about why we need maps, we talked about how we make them. Now we're going to talk about what you can do. You know, now that you have, once you have your maps, what you can do to reduce risk. So reducing flood risk makes sense. I mean, reduces the cost of flood insurance, helps protect the lives of people, the people in your communities, and maintain a quality of life. There are many ways to mitigate. The first step is prevention. So that's stuff that you do with zoning, putting open space next to your rivers, parks, soccer fields, baseball diamonds, those kinds of things, drainage systems. The next step is public information. So that's reaching out to people, making your maps available, letting people know that the maps exist, even in outreach projects. Property protection, that includes buying out properties that are in the floodplain and acquiring that land to maybe be an open space or something. If you have open space alongside of a river, that kind of slows down the water a little bit and makes the flood a little bit less severe. It's also a lot easier to clean up a field than it would be a home, or worry about the damage that could be caused. You can also do elevation, so that's with their permitting where you have to bring in and elevate your property. And we do allow some flood proofing too. Natural resources protection is kind of what I was talking about with having like a nice grassy area alongside of your river. Erosion and sediment control, stormwater best management practices. You can mitigate using emergency services. Some people have like a flood warning kind of system. And then making sure that your critical facilities are protected, kind of what I was talking about before, where there's that area where the water was going over the road. You want to make sure that you place critical facilities in a way that it helps your community respond to an emergency if there is a flood and a fire and something else going on. And then structural projects, those are things are a lot more expensive and harder to come by sometimes. That includes like reservoirs, like dams, and culverts, those kinds of things. If you want to hear about a success story, Beatrice has done a really, really good job in the last, they started in the 70s buying out homes, and Beatrice actually started buying properties along the floodplain with their own money. And they would turn that into park space. Later on, they were able to get money from FEMA and kind of get a matching program where they were able to buy out lots of properties. It's estimated in the 2015 flood that they saved about $8 million in damages, and in the 2019 flood, I've heard that it's pretty similar because the extent of that flooding was really similar. And it's a really, I'm sure y'all been to Beatrice, but it's a very nice area along the river with bike trails and dog parks and those kinds of things where they're using the river to the advantage and making it a feature of the community. So there are some grants that we have. I don't know a ton about them. It's probably more Elijah's area. And let us know if there's something that you want to do in your community. We can see what we can do, or how we can help you get your hands on some money if there's a mitigation project that you have. We also have some funding for an engineer to look into a kind of, if there is some kind of project that you have, we have what's called real-time technical assistance flooding, where funding, or one of our engineers can maybe look into that and see if that's feasible. So let us know if there's something down the line. Any questions? We've been sitting here for a very long time.
Well, one question, I guess, we have 2 new bridges due to the 2019. So they both have that problem. Those are good. See, you're hitting that.
Yeah, we would look at it. So the question was in the 2019 flooding, they have some bridges and there's hydrology studies. And yeah, we would take anything that you want to send us, we'll take a look at. You can send it to me if you have it. Okay. MD and a Ringenberg. So looking at the timeline, we're here at the kickoff meeting. We'll have a flood risk review meeting in probably the spring of 2024. And that's when you'll really get a chance to look at what Ryan's been working on. There are some, if you go on our map right now, there are some what we call flood awareness area mapping right now. So that is kind of a preliminary map. And I think a lot of it is subject to change. We're reworking a lot of it. We weren't satisfied with how it came out. So as you look at that, take that with a grain of salt. And we will in 2024 have much more solid maps for you to look at. We should have the enhanced studies for you guys to look at too. So
question for you get all like we have a facilities that were built up, we paid out. But in the maps, I mean, that you have, they still show it. So you get that.
So the question was, there's a couple of facilities that are built up to get out of the floodplain. Do we have that again? Do Lomars and they carry over, right?
Yeah, so do you know if they would have applied for a letter from FEMA that takes them out of the floodplain?
No, that I'm not sure of.
Well, if they did, they more than likely they would have submitted.
I know it's a survey.
Yeah.
To raise the fund. Yeah.
Sure. So we review those before the new maps come out, and if we find that they're still valid, then they're allowed to stay out of the floodplain.
So you need a survey report or what?
We need a letter from FEMA. And so they could provide that to us, or we should have it in our database somewhere. And we review all of them that are effective before the new maps come out. And if we find that they're still valid, as in they're higher than the floodplain, they stay out of it. Now, and so just because the boundary shows them in the floodplain, if they have that letter from FEMA, that means that they're out. The boundary may not reflect that, but
When were they constructed? The community center was constructed in, yeah, started in 18, was finished in 19.
So the latter comment.
I suppose that depends primarily on when the elevation was built up. Like, so if the dirt work occurred prior to the flight of LiDAR, then it would reflect it in the study already. But if the LiDAR doesn't show it, then we would need a LOMAR, like, in order to incorporate that into the study. And that could be something that could come up at one of the later meetings, you know, as we progress along with the project. So,
Could you guys use aspects as well?
I believe so. I mean,
yeah, I
I
mean,
I know it's nice that you, I'm just.
we're more concerned with like the elevation of the footprint, you know, so the survey would be.
Yeah.
For bridges and stuff, yeah, like structures that go across the river. Asphalt
Yeah,
survey.
I know we were doing it well. But I know a community center, we were given, said you had to raise it so high, get it out,
Sure.
yeah, so that was. Done. But I don't know, we got to follow.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see the latter.
yeah, and those elevations may have changed too with the new studies, so. But obviously, since we're in data development right now, we don't have that information as of yet. So,
And they may have just elevated to follow the regulations, rather than to actually be brought out of the floodplain. They might have just elevated just to follow the permitting. So. We have to, yeah, unless we have the letter from FEMA saying that. We're not sure.
which community is this in?
Sterling.
Sterling, okay.
So do you foresee that some of those enhanced areas or whatever that you would change back the other way? Because we have places that are back in the floodplain and according to those preliminary things. And that's a big concern into town and places that have never flooded and we've done, you know, over 10 years ago, $750,000 drainage project too. And so it was a little bit of a shock to us.
Sure.
And I think it would be a huge shock to those houses.
Yeah, so you're talking about, so the question was, she was asking if the enhanced study, because you're enhanced studying first, if the boundaries will change back to what they were before. Part of what's going on with you guys, are you talking about the flood awareness area that's on our map? That should have been cut out, so you guys are getting a new enhanced study, so that flood awareness area doesn't mean anything. We're gonna go in through and do an enhanced study there. So what we do is we cut cross sections down the whole river. And that kind of makes things look nice upstream and downstream of your community. But for Firth and Tecumseh, we're gonna go in and do an enhanced study, so you can just completely disregard what's on there right now. It might change, yeah, I mean, we haven't done it yet. Gosh, I looked at it like probably a year ago, so I'm not sure. But I wanna say that the flows through the river are similar to what the enhanced study was before.
And I know I have my book, but in 2006, which that's pretty old, I understand, but we paid Colson quite a bit of money to do that hydrology study.
Okay.
And then it took all of the, I mean, the floodway moved out of right at the edge of town and the floodplain mostly out of town. And then with our drainage project, we haven't seen any of that, and we've had some significant rains. We have a detention cells with release and all of that, but when, you know, when that, whatever you call it, preliminary stuff, that this flood awareness area.
Yeah.
And then when I talked to Chuck Chase. Just gonna, not gonna be fun or cool, and I get it if it's a risk, but we.
Sure. And if you want to send me any of that sort of drainage study that you did, a lot of the drainage studies work, they're going for like the lower frequency of storms, we call it. So they're looking more at like a 10-year or 50-year storm, and we're doing a pretty massive 100-year storm. So some of those drainage things might just get overwhelmed in the 100-year storm. But if you have the stuff, I'll take a look at it. I'm the one doing your studies, so.
It just,
Sure, and
it
if,
seemed that those preliminary things seemed pretty aggressive.
yeah, and that's, we're reworking the maps in the area, because we also found there were some areas like that. So we've started from scratch. And so the boundaries will change. I can't guarantee if they'll be smaller or bigger, because I haven't looked at it close enough, but it will change. And if you have those areas, if you wanna, you can take a Google Earth and screenshot, you can mail me a letter, you can email, and just let me know where those areas are that you think this is not right. And yeah, I'll take a closer look at it, because I will be taking a very close look at the community.
I was reading that's about those detention ponds, because we have a huge one that was built west of Fort
Okay,
about 4 or 5 miles. And about 4 months, and that thing changed things drastically after that was put in.
okay,
Because it holds so much water and releases it slow. Once that thing went in, I haven't really seen it come on the banks since then.
okay.
And when was that constructed?
Oh, man.
Done, you might have.
Yeah, and if it's a dam, it's like a dry dam. We would have that through our dam safety division. But I'm gonna make a note of it just to make sure if it's providing flood control, we can sure take a look at it.
NRD has another project. Guys doing the park.
Yeah, and that's what I'm.
So we have one more. What about that? You probably. Yeah.
So it's a DNR.
Okay,
And then, you know, bigger culverts that go take the water out of town. So we double the.
okay.
With that same.
And we did send survey out, so when was the project? Okay, yeah, we sent survey out like, I think a year or year and a half ago, so that would be included in our survey for the culvert size and stuff like that. But yeah, if you want to send me anything that you have, you said it was Olson. Yeah, I'll take a look at it and see. Okay, ready? Okay, so next steps, let us know by October 1st if you have anything about that big scary letter we sent out. We love to have your input, give us a phone call. You can leave a comment on our maps. And that is the link, the nice link to our interactive map. We will send out too many project updates, so get irritated by us. And let us know if the boundary of your community is different. Give us any studies that you have, we'll look at them. And just let us know, yeah, just let me know what areas you're concerned about. I mean, we're not here to like, you know, map your whole community in and you know.
Well, it wouldn't be the whole community.
You know what I mean? We're here to.
Very bad, you know.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I understand. I mean, we're here to like provide the most accurate maps that we have. So if there's anything that you're seeing or any studies that you have, let us know and we'll take a look at them and see what we're seeing. Coming up, our steps are we're just going to keep trucking on our mapping. We'll send you again too many updates. And then we're just here to answer questions. You know, if you have any questions ever, we have, you know, people that just answer questions. That's their job. So, and any permitting questions that you have now on your current maps, let us know. Contact page, probably too little to read. But just, you can call our main number on our office line even, and our secretary will send you to whomever you're looking to call, and these are all on our website. Any more questions? That was a
Well,
long.
these on the 3D maps that you send out, I don't know what you're anticipating on that, any idea?
The timeline on that?
Like, we'd be sending out a map that's been kind of updated and say preliminary.
Yeah, so we'll have that meeting, the flood risk review meeting in 2024 spring, and that's when we'll have those maps that you can look at. And then that's even before there's a technical term with FEMA called preliminary maps. That's before they're preliminary, so you can comment on them then. Lots of times they're up on our flood awareness area before then. But again, your flood awareness area in your area, I noticed that yesterday, it should have been cut out. Because that's not the mapping that we're gonna use. We're using an enhanced study for you guys.
Any
So,
questions that come up now, negative priority, that we should use the existing one.
yes, very good. You should use the existing ones. Sometimes communities, and Elijah can talk about this, but we have a flood awareness area, you can change your ordinance.
Yeah, so the flood awareness area is not regulatory, it's just for your information. You should use the effective maps until these new ones come effective. Many years down the road.
Yeah.
So continue to use your current maps. You can adopt those flood awareness areas in your zoning regulations if you so choose, and you could enforce within that zone, but you have to enforce the area, where,
When it's effective.
Current effective regulatory.
well, it has to be the most, where you can't reduce the amount of flood.
The most conservative.
Conservative.
Yeah, most restricted. So you would adopt both the flood awareness area and the flood.
And when we have that flood awareness area and we send out BFEs, base flood elevations, we will show both on those maps. So, and we will stretch the BFE line to be to the widest. So you'll have that information. It'll be on your base flood elevation map, but it's not what you have to regulate to unless you change your city ordinance.
Okay.
On corporate boundaries, will you guys use as your data source for the shape files that through the route map or?
It's our own. So he's asking about the corporate boundaries, what we're using as a shapefile. We have our own layer right now that we're maintaining. I know there was a push to have a statewide one, but some of them are a little bit different from tax purposes to like jurisdictional purposes. So we ended up having our own layer. So
I can actually speak to that a little bit. So we use the census data first, I guess, because that's I think the most readily available. And then if any community sends us a shapefile or CAD, even a drawing on a piece of paper, we can incorporate that as long as it's scalable and accurate. So we have various sources, but primarily it's like I think we just actually recently updated to the 2020 census data. So if communities, I know that communities get a survey from the federal government asking them, from the US Census Bureau, asking to update their community maps, which would be corporate boundaries, ETJs. And so if they respond to that, then we have that data as what would be like the most current. So, but like, for example, like City of York, when we did City of York's mapping, they had GIS, and so they sent shape files, and so we can utilize that if communities have it. So it's super easy to update.
So yeah, this is our interactive maps. This is what I'm talking about with the boundary, with a bubble around the village of Sterling. So that's your ETJ.
Yeah, there's, oh, no, first, yeah. Since we're talking about it, this is accessible on our website, just dnr.nebraska.gov, and to take a look at the floodplain boundaries. And by default, the flood awareness areas will appear, and they show up as this sort of hatched lined, transparent boundary. For now, you can still look at it for your information, but you can turn that off for now. It's the Nebraska flood hazard labels layer. That's the one that you want to stay. on. This is the effective floodplain boundary.
So yeah, we've changed the name of that layer recently, if you're looking for it. It's now the Nebraska flood hazard layer instead of, it used to be the NFHL.
And so you'll notice that there's a. We talked a little bit about providing comments back, and so this is how you would do that. If you open up this window by clicking on these 3 lines here for more. Floodplain boundary comments, this is the tool that you would use. And you have to make the layer visible, so. Okay. But essentially what you're gonna do, you'll have an instruction form, if you need assistance, or you can always contact us. But you can draw sort of a box around an area that you have a concern with. And then it will send us notification that somebody has a concern with that area, and you can provide a comment.
See the sponsor of the water.
Yeah. I noticed that.
Actually, it's probably.
That's another one.
Otherwise, this is what the community boundaries would look like on that. And so if you want to take a look at your community, if you see anything wrong with the way we have your boundaries reflected, please let us know. We can get those updated.
All right, that's all we have. There's a lot. Started at 10:30. So yeah, please reach out to us. We're here to help. I can't reiterate that enough. And thanks for coming.